For thousands of years, humans have been inventing new ways to destroy each other. It began with nothing more than a simple rock in someone's hand, swung in anger inside a dark cave. But that was only the beginning. As civilizations rose and empires clashed, our weapons evolved with terrifying speed. Spears turned into swords, swords turned into massive war machines, and eventually those machines gave birth to weapons powerful enough to erase entire cities in seconds. Every era of history had its deadliest invention, tools designed not just to win wars, but to dominate, terrify, and annihilate. From primitive stone weapons to the most powerful bomb ever created, this is the chilling evolution of the deadliest weapons in human history.
Long before kingdoms, armies, or even written language existed, humans were already fighting each other. This was the Stone Age, a time when people lived in caves, hunted wild animals, and relied entirely on nature to survive. Back then, the most dangerous weapon a person could have was incredibly simple: a rock. It may sound primitive, but a rock in the hands of a determined human could be deadly. One powerful strike was enough to crack a skull, and from a distance, stones could be thrown with surprising force and accuracy. For thousands of years, this basic weapon was all early humans had when conflicts broke out. But humans are nothing if not inventive. Eventually, someone had a brilliant idea. Take a sharp piece of stone and attach it to the end of a long stick. Suddenly, people no longer needed to get dangerously close to their enemies. The spear was born. This simple invention changed everything. With a spear, humans could hunt larger animals, defend themselves more effectively, and fight from a safer distance. It became one of the most important weapons in human history and remained in use for tens of thousands of years. And yet, this was only the beginning of humanity's long and terrifying journey of creating deadlier and more advanced weapons.
As human intelligence evolved, so did the way people fought. Early humans began to realize that the safest way to defeat an enemy was not by getting close, but by attacking from a distance. Around 70,000 years ago, humans started developing more advanced hunting and combat techniques. Throwing stones became more precise, and spears were no longer just used for stabbing. They were now thrown with deadly force toward enemies or animals. This simple change made a huge difference. A thrown spear could strike a target from several meters away, allowing a hunter or warrior to injure an enemy without putting themselves directly in danger. Groups of hunters could even coordinate their attacks, launching multiple spears at once to overwhelm their target. Soon, other tools for ranged attacks began to appear. Humans experimented with ways to throw stones farther and harder, eventually leading to the development of early slings and throwing tools. For thousands of years, these basic long-range weapons dominated human combat. They were simple, easy to make, and incredibly effective. But as small tribes slowly grew into larger societies and civilizations, the need for stronger, sharper, and more terrifying weapons began to rise. And with the arrival of metalworking, warfare was about to change forever. As civilizations began to grow, humans discovered something that would change warfare forever: metal. This period became known as the Bronze Age, when people learned to combine copper and tin to create bronze, a metal much stronger and more durable than stone. With this new material, weapons became sharper, stronger, and far more deadly. Across the world, new and terrifying weapons appeared. One of the most fearsome was the Macuahuitl, used by the Aztec civilization in Central America. At first glance, it looked like a simple wooden club, but along its edges were embedded several razor-sharp obsidian blades. Obsidian is volcanic glass, and its edges can be sharper than modern steel. When swung in battle, the Macuahuitl could cause devastating wounds, slicing deep into flesh and bone. Many enemies who faced it did not survive the injuries it inflicted. At the same time, other civilizations were developing their own bronze weapons, swords, spears, daggers, and shields, creating armies that were far more organized and dangerous than anything seen before. Human warfare was no longer a chaotic struggle between individuals. It was becoming something much larger. Armies were forming. Empires were rising. And the weapons of war were becoming more lethal with every generation. As civilizations grew larger, warfare became more organized and strategic. Armies were no longer just groups of fighters charging into battle. They became disciplined forces trained to fight together. During this time, weapons like swords, spears, shields, and slings became the standard equipment for soldiers across many ancient civilizations. One famous example was the khopesh, a curved sword used by the ancient Egyptians. Its unique hook-like shape allowed warriors to slash, pull shields away, and strike enemies with devastating force. But the true power of these weapons came when soldiers fought as a unit. One of the most powerful military formations of the ancient world was the phalanx. In this formation, soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder in tight rows, holding long spears pointing forward while their shields overlapped for protection. From the front, the formation looked like an impenetrable wall of shields and spears. Any enemy who tried to attack would face dozens of spear points at once. When hundreds of soldiers advanced together in this formation, they were nearly unstoppable. Entire battlefields could be dominated by disciplined armies moving like a single unstoppable machine. Yet even these powerful weapons had a weakness. They worked well in open battles, but they were far less effective against the massive stone fortresses and castles that would soon dominate the next era of warfare. As the world entered the Middle Ages, warfare faced a new challenge. Kings and rulers began building massive castles and fortified cities, protected by towering stone walls and heavy gates. These fortresses were designed to keep enemies out and make direct attacks nearly impossible. To overcome these defenses, armies developed enormous machines known as siege weapons. One of the most powerful of these machines was the trebuchet. This giant device used a massive counterweight to launch huge stones through the air. Some trebuchets could throw rocks weighing over 90 kilograms across distances of nearly 300 meters. When these stones slammed into castle walls, they could slowly break even the strongest defenses. Another terrifying siege weapon was the ballista. It looked like a gigantic crossbow and could fire enormous bolts with incredible force. These bolts were powerful enough to pierce armor, destroy wooden structures, and even strike enemies on top of castle walls. There was also the simple but effective battering ram. This weapon was usually a massive log carried by several soldiers. By repeatedly slamming it against gates or walls, armies could eventually smash their way into a fortress. Siege weapons turned warfare into a battle of patience and destruction. Instead of quick fights, many battles now lasted weeks or even months, as armies slowly tore down the defenses of powerful kingdoms. As the world entered the Middle Ages, warfare faced a new challenge. Kings and rulers began building massive castles and fortified cities, protected by towering stone walls and heavy gates. These fortresses were designed to keep enemies out and make direct attacks nearly impossible. To overcome these defenses, armies developed enormous machines known as siege weapons. One of the most powerful of these machines was the trebuchet. This giant device used a massive counterweight to launch huge stones through the air. Some trebuchets could throw rocks weighing over 90 kilograms across distances of nearly 300 meters. When these stones slammed into castle walls, they could slowly break even the strongest defenses. Another terrifying siege weapon was the ballista. It looked like a gigantic crossbow and could fire enormous bolts with incredible force. These bolts were powerful enough to pierce armor, destroy wooden structures, and even strike enemies on top of castle walls. There was also the simple but effective battering ram. This weapon was usually a massive log carried by several soldiers. By repeatedly slamming it against gates or walls, armies could eventually smash their way into a fortress. Siege weapons turned warfare into a battle of patience and destruction. Instead of quick fights, many battles now lasted weeks or even months, as armies slowly tore down the defenses of powerful kingdoms. While many armies were perfecting weapons for land battles, another deadly innovation appeared at sea. This weapon was known as Greek fire, and it became one of the most feared tools of naval warfare in the ancient world. Greek fire was a mysterious, sticky liquid that could be set on fire and would continue burning even on water. Once ignited, it was almost impossible to extinguish. For sailors trapped on wooden ships, this made it absolutely terrifying. The Byzantine Empire used this weapon to defend their fleets against enemy navies. Soldiers would spray the flaming liquid through metal tubes mounted on their ships, launching streams of fire directly onto enemy vessels. Sometimes the substance was also placed inside clay containers and thrown like primitive grenades. When the burning mixture hit a ship, the flames would spread quickly across the wood, turning entire vessels into floating infernos. What made Greek fire even more mysterious was its secret formula. The Byzantines guarded the recipe so carefully that it was known only to a few trusted individuals. Even today, historians are not completely certain how it was made, though many believe it may have been similar to modern flammable substances like napalm. For centuries, Greek fire gave the Byzantine navy a terrifying advantage at sea. But an even greater revolution in weapons was about to begin, one that would change warfare forever. Around the 10th century, a discovery in ancient China would change the future of warfare forever. That discovery was gunpowder. Originally, gunpowder was created by Chinese alchemists who were searching for an elixir of immortality. Instead, they accidentally invented one of the most destructive substances in human history. At first, gunpowder was used mainly for fireworks and signals. But it didn't take long before someone realized its potential as a weapon. One of the earliest gunpowder weapons was called the fire lance. This strange invention looked like a traditional spear, but attached to the end was a small tube filled with gunpowder. When ignited, the tube would blast out flames, sparks, and burning debris toward the enemy. At close range, the fire lance was terrifying. The explosion of heat and flying fragments could burn or seriously injure anyone standing in front of it. Over time, soldiers began adding small metal pellets and fragments into the tube. When the gunpowder exploded, these projectiles were launched outward with deadly force. This simple innovation marked the birth of firearms. From this moment forward, weapons would evolve rapidly, from primitive gunpowder tubes to cannons, muskets, and eventually the powerful guns used in modern warfare. Humanity had just taken its first step into a new and far more dangerous era of weapons. By the early 20th century, technology had advanced at an incredible pace. Factories could produce weapons faster than ever before, and nations around the world were preparing for conflicts on a scale humanity had never seen. When World War I began in 1914, the battlefield became a terrifying showcase of modern destruction. Soldiers now fought with machine guns, grenades, tanks, and warplanes. Machine guns could fire hundreds of bullets in minutes, cutting down entire waves of advancing soldiers. Tanks rolled across muddy battlefields, crushing obstacles and providing armored protection for troops. But the most horrifying weapon introduced during this war was chemical gas. Imagine standing in a muddy trench, exhausted and waiting for the next attack. Suddenly, a strange yellow-green cloud begins drifting toward your position. At first, it looks harmless, until it reaches you. This was mustard gas. Once inhaled, the gas attacked the lungs, making breathing incredibly painful. It caused severe burns on the skin, blistering flesh, and swelling the eyes shut. Many soldiers were left blind, choking, and suffering for days or even weeks before dying. Gas attacks became one of the most feared parts of World War I. Even survivors often carried the painful effects for the rest of their lives. The horrors of chemical warfare shocked the world so deeply that after the war, many countries agreed to ban the use of toxic gas in combat. But unfortunately, the next global conflict would introduce a weapon even more devastating. By the end of World War II, humanity had reached a terrifying milestone in the evolution of weapons. Scientists had discovered how to unlock the power hidden inside the atom. When certain elements like uranium-235 are split in a process called nuclear fission, they release an enormous amount of energy. If this reaction happens rapidly and uncontrollably, it creates a massive explosion. This discovery led to the creation of the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the first nuclear weapon ever used in war was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The bomb, known as Little Boy, weighed over 4,000 kilograms. In a single blinding flash, the city was devastated. Tens of thousands of people died instantly, and many more would later die from radiation sickness. The war ended shortly after, but the story of nuclear weapons was far from over. In 1961, the Soviet Union tested the most powerful bomb ever created, the Tsar Bomba. Its explosion was so enormous that the mushroom cloud rose nearly 67 kilometers into the sky, higher than several Mount Everests stacked on top of each other. For the first time in history, humanity had created a weapon capable of destroying entire civilizations. And perhaps the most frightening part is this: these weapons still exist today.